Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good buddies, Greg Sterling, John Gerard, and Neil Polachek. What's up, guys?
How's it going, Earl?
How's it going? Crazy times. Crazy things happening in this world. We got today we're going to talk about some interesting things. We're going to start talking about for the first time, real world consequences of the AI boom. So first, the hardware arms race is accelerating. Mac minis are selling out. Mac Ultras are around $9,000, and people are starting to run their own large language models locally. And there are already signs of RAM shortages. And at the same time, developers are experimenting with autonomous agents like OpenClaw. It's a new technology, new capability, which are burning through tens of thousands of tokens and tens of thousands of dollars in token usage, rather. And AI just isn't for software anymore. It's becoming the infrastructure, and we'll get into the hardware game as part of that. Also, this infrastructure requires people to build it. BlackRock just launched a $100 million initiative to train skilled workers because there is growing concern that the U.S. might not have enough electricians, technicians, and construction workers to build the next wave of AI data centers. So $100 million going towards that. Pretty wild. So we'll get into that as well. And then meanwhile, the scale of AI adoption is much bigger than most people realize. There's new data that shows that AI tools now account for 56% of global search-related activity, generating 45 billion monthly sessions. Most of that is happening on mobile apps. And interestingly, half of AI prompts aren't even searched. They're people using AI to do the work, write codes, or create things. And then finally, our last story of the day is going to be about how AI is replacing large portions of the workforce and how does the economy adjust. Andrew Yang is proposing a shift in the tax system, stop taxing workers and start taxing AI automation companies, and also the businesses that end up losing workers, essentially charging the companies when machines replace human jobs. So today we'll look at the AI boom in these four angles, and let's get into it. Our first story, let's talk a little bit about the hardware arms race with Mac minis selling out, Mac Ultras at $9,000, and people are running their large local language models. John, you want to jump in on this one?
This is a very interesting kind of, I guess you can think about it as second order effect of what's happening in the AI world, because we all know that AI consumes a lot of resources on the hardware side. It's the main reason behind the meteoric growth of Nvidia, the chip company that started in gaming, and just so happens that their graphics cards are incredibly useful for other things like crypto and now AI. So the demand on the hardware side has exploded, frankly, and that's starting to create ripple effects. They're frankly very interesting. One is shortages, which is really normal in a time of crazy, explosive and unforeseen demand. And we're talking about chip manufacturers saying, "Hey, we are sold out of inventory for 12 months. So if you need something to supply your new hardware that you're going to be building, get in line, and we'll talk to you next March." Right? So like we're literally at that level of backup, which is pretty nuts. Of course, that has implications for the entire supply chain. Everything that produces those chips and puts pressure on new factories and on the raw materials and everything else. The other interesting implication, though, is we're seeing how this is starting to show up in changing demand and changing costs on the consumer side of the equation. So Mac minis flying off the shelves. Why? Because people are very, very interested in running this brand new agent called OpenClaw. And one of the best setups for that happens to be to have your own dedicated machine sitting in the corner, plugged into the internet, always on, running that agent 24/7. We're also seeing what I think are sort of strange phenomena around products that were at one point extremely niche high-end products. So the Mac Ultra is an example of this. I think that's a product line that starts in a $9,000 plus per month range, extremely loaded up on RAM. I don't remember what the actual numbers are, but I want to say something like 200 gigabytes or something of RAM. We can even look it up on the fly here, but it's an insane number. And now a $9,000 piece of hardware that might have only been within budget for a video editor, who's working with very large files, is now a reasonable purchase for somebody who's spending $1,000 a month on AI tokens and could plausibly run an entire LLM and a quite large model on a Mac Ultra. So very strange, second order effects showing up here across the board on the hardware and infrastructure side. And this is to say nothing of the data center stories that are blowing up right now too.
Does that suggest to you, John, that they should start raising prices on all these pieces of hardware?
Well, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. Like markets, even though it feels messy and weird in the moment, are really good at solving these problems. So, in the midst of what feels like a lot of chaos, markets respond by raising prices when there's, increasing demand and fixed supply. As a side note, that ends up being an interesting sort of a piece of thinking to apply to the entire AI revolution. One of the things that is probably the case is that the basic sort of fundamental laws of economics probably don't break. It's just that the inputs are really, really weird right now. So, the fact that there's this crazy demand for a Mac Mini or for a $9,000 Mac Ultra, laws of economics are going to kick in and make the proper adjustments. Pricing pressures to find fair market price based on changing supply and demand.
Or some people build a competitive product.
I just looked up the Mac Mini and what the current price is. Apple's selling the most current version of it with an M4 chip for $600, but there's a higher end chip that they're selling for $1,400, basically, M4
Yep.
Pro chip. So that tier did not exist before. It was a low cost CPU that you could get without any frills and without any peripherals or anything. And now they've created this higher end version that's more than twice as expensive.
The ranges are opening up, right? Because Apple just launched the MacBook Neo as well, and that's like not even $600 for that computer, for that laptop.
Yeah. And that, by the way, that's clearly been in the works for a while, and is running counter to the trend we're just describing in some ways.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more like that's a let's call it a terminal. It's a dumb terminal that doesn't have a whole lot of compute power. You're not going to run a large language model or even a small language model.
No, it's got 8 gigs of RAM on it by default. Where it's like, the Ultra that you're talking about starts at 96 gigabytes of RAM and it goes up to 256, which is crazy.
The Neo thing is a shelf space play, to go down market to capture some of those customers that have always bought a Chromebook or a cheap Windows machine or something like that.
Yeah. Get them into the ecosystem.
Guys just filling the shelves with more and more product.
Yep. Students and that type of thing. The OpenClaw thing is really interesting because as people start to develop agents with OpenClaw, and that's what it is. It's a platform that you can create a team of agents that do a number of different tasks. So think of it as like your business operating system where you have, marketing tasks that can be done or finance tasks or operation tasks. And you build this team of agents that execute these different tasks. Along with this comes this massive use of tokens, which surprised a lot of people. They didn't realize that token usage was going to be so big. And as a result of that, people were getting these whopping bills of like $2,000 a day that they didn't realize that they'd shoot up that many tokens. So there's a whole wave of efficiencies now and skills that are coming out with Cloud Code and others that create efficiency token usage. And even Anthropic just came out with this. There's this new command called /BTW, which allows you to just chat with Claude in the moment without having it go through the full memory of what happened, which is what was chewing up a lot of tokens through this process. So Anthropic just responded very quickly to it to say, hold on a second, we'll create a solution for that. It's fascinating, John, to your point that suddenly there's this massive expense that's happening in the space at the consumer level or prosumer almost level. It's not even like prosumer yet. A lot of it is just enthusiasts who are, starting to kick around some of these apps and buying some of this hardware and starting to put this stuff together to create these business opportunities. But a lot of times they don't even know what the business opportunity is. It's not clear. They just want to start playing with it. And it's a very expensive toy, as they're starting to find out.
I'll just make a final point, which is sort of adjacent, which is the SaaS versus AI point. How AI is going to sort of eat SaaS now. Somebody was arguing that AI is not SaaS because as your usage goes up, as you scale, your costs go up. In SaaS, you've got sunk costs or whatever. You've built your infrastructure, and then as you add users incrementally, there aren't additional significant costs that you incur. But with AI, your costs go up with every single user potentially because they're doing this. They're engaging the system and they're using tokens, and so this is an interesting thing to contemplate in the economics of AI versus SaaS or SaaS enhanced with AI or whatever, which we don't need to digress into. I just wanted to throw that in as a little coda to that conversation.
Yeah, but it is very interesting because in many cases, the costs that are being borne by the supplier here are barely break even or even not break even, because they're sort of taking a loss leader approach. And, so, scale is not your
cost much, right?
scale is not your friend when that's the dynamic. If you have negative unit economics, like that's a recipe for burning a lot of money. It's the old internet. There was a great Saturday Night Live skit a million years ago called the Change Bank, and where you go in and they give you exact change for your what you give the money for, and they ask, well, so how do you make money? And the guy says the answer is simple: volume. and it's the same situation here. You know what I mean? Like negative unit economics, like volume is not your friend. But I also I did want to just touch for a second on what Andy said, which is this is very weird, and I think a little unprecedented. The amount of consumer and corporate, but let's just stick with sort of consumer and enthusiast dollars that are being diverted to a new technology at such scale. This isn't a bunch of hobbyists, spending $10 a month on, a new like code repo tool or something. This is a lot of people spending $200 a month, still a significant number spending $1,000 a month, and millions of people spending $20 a month. And I'm sure somebody has done this study, but I don't know of any other technology where so much budget, personal, family enthusiast and small business budget has been reallocated to a new technology this quickly. It is crazy. And yes, the unit economics are screwy and it may not work. That's a little scary. But they're real dollars. People are pulling out their checkbooks.
Or allocated. My neighbor signed up for a service for $5 a month where it looks as his flights. And if there's a decrease in the flight, they'll let him know. And I think I don't know if it actually rebooks him, but he saved $20 yesterday. So he got $15 back by spending $5 on this tool.
A lot of these micro tools like that come out that are these, $5 a month, kind of tip jar apps that will come out that will have that kind of impact. So you spend $5, you get 15, and you start doing that a bunch
every month.
Yeah. The problem with that particular tool is you have to book everything through them so they can track it. That's the problem.
Have you tried
But let's.
So they make their cut on the back end for the referral fee as well.
They take 20%, and they take 20% of whatever they save you.
Yeah, and that's a good example though of like how sustainable are those solutions? Presumably you get in the situation where a skill that you can download for free on GitHub that you plug into your OpenClaw instance does that for you. And that's probably where we're going with a lot of this. I think that's inevitable. And so now you can kind of pick and choose from this massive library of efficiency gainers. It's going to take out a lot of middlemen. I think that's a reality here that a lot of people haven't confronted fully yet.
So Andy, I have a suggestion that we talk about the sort of the usage report, because that sort of connects with what we're talking about here with John's point that
Yeah, go for it.
massive consumer usage, sort of ramping more quickly than something else, which I think is correct. So you want me to just describe it?
Let's talk about the adoption. There's new data that shows that AI usage may already account for 56% of global search-related activity, with about 45 billion monthly sessions. What's really interesting is that half of that are AI prompts that aren't search at all. They're people using AI to actually do the work. So AI isn't replacing search; it's becoming more general purpose kind of a tool. So Greg, you wanna talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you just to sort of recap the history, AI sort of showed up, ChatGPT showed up, and everybody said, "Oh, Google is done," and that, of course, didn't happen. And there has been a sort of a backlash within the search marketing world, where clickstream data have been used to disprove the idea that AI is kind of taking over. It's a very small percentage of referral traffic versus Google. Google's search volumes have not decreased. This AI thing is overhyped. It's meaningful, but it's really not the phenomenon that everybody has said it was. And this report is making the case that it's a much bigger deal than has been documented by many of these data-based kind of clickstream reports, which are only about the desktop. They only capture desktop usage. And this report says that I think it was something like 83% of AI usage is mobile app based, and 75% in the US. So that's totally blind to a lot of these kind of search related tools that are tracking referral volume and everything. But the gestalt of the report, which has a lot of details, very interesting, is just what John was saying, that the uptake has been really massive, and that a portion of that, as you point out, Andy, is stuff that isn't search, doesn't look like search. It's work related, or it's personal, but it has little to do with finding out information or finding products and services.
It's the therapist, it's the personal therapist, a lot of that, right?
I have to imagine also is part of this utility that happens with is that there are various searches that are embedded into these discussions that you have. So, as you know, I mean, just with any conversational anything, you start getting into something, and then you have questions in the middle of that session, right? So there's utility definitely that people are getting out of this, but in that utility, they're asking it questions that might be searches as well. But the overall point of this article is that they're saying that this is really driving more technology adoption and just more utility than it is replacing search necessarily.
And more overall volume, more activity than, it's the bigger pie theory. Google isn't being diminished.
But the fourth bullet in that data says that Google's share of global search-related activity dropped from 89% in 2023 to 71% in late 2025.
That's a very significant drop, actually.
I mean, that's a lot. That's not a small shift.
Yet Google's ad revenue has not suffered at all. They're growing ad revenue. Part of the reason for that is that they're stuffing more ads in front of people at every turn.
Sure.
But Google is an ad company. Google is an ad platform, first and foremost. The information that they deliver is incidental. That's the means to an end for them. And as long as they can keep ad revenue growing, everybody's happy internally and among investors. The reason that they've got Gemini, the reason they've got AI mode, and they're jamming more AI features into the search results, is because they understand fundamentally that users like the interface, like the conversational interaction, and they're trying to substitute their own product for ChatGPT, essentially, which for many people is working because Gemini has been growing, and it's partly about the distribution that Google has. But it's just an interesting report that kind of debunks the idea that, AI is just a trickle of traffic, and it's really not the phenomenon that everybody thought it was.
The other thing is that Google's integrating a ton of functionality in their AI solutions. So just even beyond search, and really what ties back to this article here is that because AI is becoming more of a general purpose tool, and that's part of what this article is talking about. Google is creating this landscape and this kind of sandbox for you to be able to do all kinds of stuff, multimodal, create images, create, through Notebook LM, create audio, create slides, integration with the AI, with all the Google Workspace tools, all that kind of stuff is general purpose use, keeps people glued within Google's ecosystem, and makes it so that that's their moat essentially, and they're doubling down on that whole creating that fully immersive environment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that the general purpose tool aspect of this is really compelling. Let's go on to our next story here. This is a surprising bottleneck in the AI economy. It's not chips, it's not tokens or any of that stuff. It's people. And BlackRock just announced a $100 million initiative to train skilled trades and trade workers, because the industry is worried that there won't be enough electricians, technicians, HVAC people, and builders to construct the next wave of AI data centers. Greg, you want to talk about this one?
Well, it's Neil's item, really.
Oh, Neil, go for it.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that a company like BlackRock is going to try and train, I think it said 50,000 of those tradespeople. The article pointed to something like $10 trillion in infrastructure, and they really tied it to digital, electrical, data infrastructure. $10 trillion of investment between now and 2033. That's only 8 years away. That's like close to $1 trillion a year, maybe, or something, a little over $1 trillion a year. And somebody's got to build all that stuff. And that's what they're concerned about, is that there are not enough people to actually build these things out. And so putting their money where their mouth is, as they invest in data centers over here, they've got to invest in people to build those data centers. I think they're going to find a lot of people to train, because people realize they don't have their white collar job anymore, and they need to go do something that they can make a living at.
In previous, I think it might have been Q2, where the economic numbers pointed to the fact, there's the job growth is all concentrated in healthcare and then in areas related to AI investments, and that this is the thing that is driving any growth in this current economy. The economy's stagnant in the absence of a couple of isolated bright spots, and so this is an important area for people, and especially if as Neil says, white collar employees are going to lose jobs to AI and need to find jobs. These are potential places that people can go, although not everybody is going to be able to move from being a paralegal or an accountant to wielding a nail gun and be an electrician.
Yeah, we talked about basic economic forces at work before earlier. This is another example of the same thing, I think, right? So huge demand for data centers, shortage of workers, the implied salary for the worker goes up. Eventually it goes up by enough that people say, well, this doesn't make sense to pay this person $500,000. Why don't I allocate $100,000 to train somebody else and pay them $200,000? And so the math just ends up being straightforward, especially if you're a BlackRock and this is what you do. You look for market imbalances and exploit them. The only thing I wonder, since it is BlackRock, is what those agreements look like with those 50,000 they're training. I see it like a modern indentured servitude, sort of an agreement as a possibility. You'll be able to pay this off within 4 generations. Don't worry about it.
Who is actually going to train people? BlackRock is an investment firm.
Well, they're spending the money to find the trainers to train the people.
They'll buy a company. I mean, they'll buy a training company.
Right. And they're looking to support 50,000 workers in skilled trades, right? Where the focus is electricians, HVAC technicians, plumbers, iron workers, and so forth. And the interesting thing about this is that this flies in the face of just about any venture capital kind of rule of thumb. We're now going to the opposite end of the spectrum. And yes, they will, I'm sure, acquire companies that are training companies. But there's an interesting discussion that's happening now where you've got companies like Y Combinator who are saying there are really two ways to go to market with this AI stuff. You can sell the tools and picks and shovels and sell those solutions, or you can go be the best in the category. So if it's information work like in legal or consulting or a direction like that, or in this case, it's skilled trades, and integrate AI solutions into those businesses to be able to be the best in their category and the best in their local market. These trades are really interesting corner of the market because they're least likely to be disrupted by AI because you physically have to be there until robots and that whole vision, happens, I suppose. But in the meantime, you really need people to actually do the work. And so from Y Combinator's perspective, for example, and a lot of other investors now are looking at this saying, well, let's go use AI to help grow these businesses to become the best in their category and the best in their local markets. So there are these interesting roll-up opportunities that are happening in this category as well.
If you can make the HVAC guy contracting company more efficient, you can get more out of that same company. They can do, a third more projects because AI has improved the efficiency of how they run their business.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
by the way, that's not totally foreign to the PEs, right? There's a lot of PE firms that are doing local business roll-ups, the commercial landscaping, gardening,
for sure has been going on forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not afraid of the real world, local stuff. And this is sort of it's similar flavor.
It's like locusts moving from field to field. They just simply moved to this area.
Andrew Yang, ex-presidential candidate, has a provocative idea around, this whole transition in the workforce. And if AI really starts replacing jobs at scale, how does the economy adapt? His provocative idea is stop taxing the workers and start taxing the AI automation. So the idea is that if a company replaces hundreds of employees with AI systems, they should pay the tax equivalent to the payroll taxes that disappeared, or even the employee taxes that disappeared. So, for example, just to run through a quick scenario, let's say that an employee is making $50,000 a year. Let's say that their tax that they would pay on that, state and fed, maybe it's $18,000 or $20,000, let's say. Of that, it's called 20. And let's say that it costs $10,000 in AI usage, so maybe it's $30,000. So instead of paying the $50,000 to the employee, the company would pay the $30,000. 20 of that would go to pay for that tax that the employee would have paid for, which is a really interesting idea because when you get into this whole transition of AI taking jobs, becomes really curious as to who's paying taxes then anyway. So jump ball on this one. What do you guys think about this?
Well, it's provocative, and that you got to give him credit for being provocative. And I think he's looking out, to potential lots of job losses and what's that going to mean, and then how does a city that may get a piece of the payroll tax continue to fund services? I mean, it's all connected, and he's just trying to get in front of it and propose that, we stop taxing workers and start taxing these tools.
Well, because we won't be able to tax workers if they're displaced,
if they're non-existent, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways this fits a pattern, right? That you tax something that has a negative impact on something else. I think those are, I don't remember my economics terms, but I think it's network externalities. and you use the tax revenue to offset the harm elsewhere. I mean, this is sort of carbon offset taxes, other sort of polluter taxes. This is, taxing cannabis and alcohol and funding, rehabs and drug awareness programs with some of that. So there's a flavor of that. I don't know if his complimentary proposal was that those dollars go into retraining or something like that. But like you guys said, it's provocative. That's for sure.
Well, the difference I think between this and some of the taxes that you mentioned are those are additional taxes that have gotten layered in, whereas this tax and the amount of revenue that is seen from employees will just disappear if employees disappear. So what he's saying is, rather than that money going away, you got to run the government somehow. Who's going to pay the taxes if everybody's going away? So
as an example, San Francisco collected about $1 billion in payroll taxes recently in the last year or two on an annual basis. If you lose employees because of that, then that $1 billion goes to 500 million. Well, how do you fill that gap? There's still, you still got to do
roads. How do you fix, all this infrastructure that you still need for people?
To have the fire department.
You get the Doge boys to come in and fix it. They're so good at that.
Do I get a $2,000 check for that?
San Francisco's lucky because Anthropic keeps buying up office space, and they've now got 1 million square feet, and OpenAI's got a ton of square feet, so they're okay for a while. But other cities, this really may have a big effect on.
Well, this is what the AI data centers have been pitched as a source of jobs and revenue for a lot of these communities. So, that's what's going on there. This is part of a much larger discussion that we can't have right now about the social impact of AI and this sort of uncertainty about the future in multiple areas. Not, jobs is the sort of first and foremost, but I think it's very uncertain. The U.S. right now has a anti-regulatory bias, so these companies are kind of just running wild, doing whatever they want. But we may reach a point where we need to much more strictly regulate what these companies can do and can't do in order to protect sort of social stability. So-called capitalists are starting to clue in to the idea that the enormous disparity of income that has grown in this country over the last couple of generations or generation is ultimately bad for them as well. And they're just the light bulb is just starting to go off in their heads about that. Oh, what happens if we have all this social instability? Maybe it's not good for us. We can't sell as much.
That's what I like about what you said, Neil, is that at least he's getting ahead of it, and somebody's got to start getting ahead of this stuff because it's coming like a freight train, and it's refreshing to hear somebody come up with some fresh ideas like this.
Putting something out there.
Task force together. I'm surprised there isn't already one, but with all the money that's going into this, that there isn't already some sort of task force that's working on a plan for whether it's a range of things from universal basic income to tax supplementation, in this kind of way.
Generally speaking, historically, those programs have not worked. This BlackRock initiative may be successful, but the idea that, Clinton was talking about that. Bill Clinton was talking about that many years ago. Well, these employers who are being displaced through outsourcing and, can upskill, reskill, and then find comparable or better paying jobs. And that did not happen as a general rule.
We need to have a WTA project sort of, initiative.
We need to have a debate as a society, and as you say, start really looking in very pragmatic and concrete ways at what the different scenarios are and how to address them.
Yeah. For better or worse, this is another thing where market forces will have their way, and it will work out one way or the other. And it's going to be incredibly messy and chaotic in the intervening years. It's you can make the case that the French Revolution was market forces at one extreme. Like when that was
certainly a contributing factor.
Yeah. So and that may be where we're headed. With the gap, wealth inequality is like something will break at some point if it's not addressed, and it doesn't look like it's getting addressed, and AI seems to be making it worse. So here we are.
AI has the capacity to make it worse. It doesn't necessarily have to make it worse.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
I think there are ways to use AI that don't create all this social disruption. This is a longer philosophical discussion that we can have on another occasion. But
Yeah. I got a jam.
All right. Thanks. I think everybody else has to jam too. So thanks everybody for listening. You got a jam as well. So thanks everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Great
See you
episode,
later.
guys.
Guys.
bye.